let's first start talking about what could be good debt, because there's a lot of people in this world that believe that all debt is bad and you shouldn't have any debt. So a couple examples of good debt. One is debt that you take on for a business. Another example is debt that you take on to purchase real estate. You can also use debt in margin accounts with investing in stocks or options. And some people classify education as good debt. And we're going to talk about how that could fall into either good or bad debt. So why would I take on debt for either business or real estate? And the reason I would do that is because I want to increase my returns. And if I'm borrowing money at a lower rate of interest than I can get on my return on investment, then I can make more money faster. So if I was operating a business, let's say it was a product business and I had to have inventory, I would probably need to borrow money to purchase my inventory so that I can go out and sell that product to people. And it's unlikely that I have enough cash lying around to do that. So I would borrow money to buy that inventory, and then I would be able to have the inventory I need to sell and generate the income for my business. Now, I mentioned real estate is another good opportunity for to use debt as a good option. And if I can borrow money at a decent interest rate and I can get a higher rate of return on the investment, using debt can be a great option. Now, I want to take a minute and talk specifically about a personal residence or a place that you live. Using a mortgage or getting debt on a personal residence is a very common practice, at least in the United States. And it's very helpful because most people don't have, let's say the average house in the United States is $250,000. Most people don't have $250,000 lying around to buy a house with all cash. So they'll use a mortgage or debt to buy a primary residence, which allows them to pay down that investment over a period of time. A lot of people like to get to a point where they can pay off their primary residence so they have no debt. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's a very conservative strategy. It can bring a lot of peace in your life to know that your home is paid off. And another alternative argument is that you can generally get the cheapest debt with a primary residence. So interest rates are kind of all over the place right now, but if you can get, let's say, an interest rate of 4 or 5% on a primary residence, that's probably the cheapest money you can borrow, because when you start talking about credit cards or things like that, your interest rates are going to be in the teens or maybe even higher, depending on what your credit rating is. So using your personal residence as a investing strategy to borrow money at the lowest rate can be really good in helping you grow your wealth, and you should play that into your strategy. Now, I also mentioned margin accounts. Margin accounts is when you borrow money to buy stocks or options in the stock market. And to be honest, my opinion is that margin accounts can be quite risky, especially if you don't know what you're doing. So if you go into investing in stocks or options, you should be very careful with using margin accounts so that you don't get yourself into a sticky situation. Now, I mentioned education can be good debt. So a lot of people take out student loans to go to school, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. You should be very careful in how you take out student loans, because a lot of people can take out student loans in the hundreds of thousands if you're going to be a doctor or something like that. And if you think you can get a job because of the degree you earn that will pay you enough to pay back your student loans, then it could be a good decision. Now, if you're an individual that just got out of high school and you are thinking about going to college and you take on hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt just for any degree that isn't going to pay you back, that's not the wisest decision of how to take on debt. I want to share a quick story. I actually have a brother-in-law who went to school. I won't get into specifics about what he does, but pretty good career that he chose. And he had to take on quite a bit of student debt just to graduate. He was very smart in how he did it, but because of the degree he was getting, he still took on a large amount of student debt. And it's been many years, the debt company was very, we'll call it shady in the way they structured the loan. and it's almost impossible for them to pay it back quickly, which makes me feel bad for my brother-in-law, because he's trying to do everything he could to just get ahead in life, and this student loan is really consuming him and making it hard for him to invest and to grow his wealth. So student loans can be good debt if they're structured properly and not taken advantage of, or just make sure that you're using student debt properly so that you don't get yourself into a rough situation. Now, we also want to talk a little bit about bad debt. And bad debt, going back to the rich dad, poor dad analogy, is anything that is considered a liability. So we could throw anything into this category: cars, boats, snowmobiles. We've also got credit cards. You could have cash advances. Anything that is going to take money out of your pocket every month is, in my opinion, bad debt. Now, I want to take a second and talk specifically about cars, because at least for most of America, you need some sort of transportation. So you could debate that cars, it's sort of okay to take out debt for a car reasonably. Now, let's say I was in need of a new car. Doesn't have to be a brand new car, but I was in need of a car. If you don't have, let's call it $25,000 in cash to buy a car, it might be okay to take out a loan for somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 so that you can have that mode of transportation. Now, at the same time, if you were in need of a car, going out and buying a $150,000 Mercedes just because that's what you want is not the best financial decision. If you just need a mode of transportation, focus on getting the mode of transportation at the lower cost, which would probably be also a lower operating cost, instead of getting the luxury item when you're trying to build your wealth. Now, if you get to a point where you're really wealthy and you have enough assets producing a ton of passive income for you, that's the time that you can buy luxury items if that's what you want to do. But as you're growing your wealth, focus on spending less on things that are necessities, but would be considered bad debt. Credit cards are obviously bad debt as well. And the reason for that is they generally charge a very high interest rate. Now, you might argue that, well, a lot of credit cards have these offers where I can get this really low interest rate at the beginning. But if you look at the fine print, after a short period of time, those interest rates go up pretty high, and holding balances on those can really affect the amount of cash that you have available to invest in other things. I've already talked quite a bit about different interest rates, but focusing on the interest rates that you have on your debt is one of the most important pieces in being able to pay off your debt quickly and use the cash and assets that you have to grow your wealth.